This is my true story. I built a company from nothing and gave my only son the life I never had. I sent him to the best schools, paid for his degree overseas, and trusted he would carry my legacy. But one day, in front of his employees, he looked me in the eye and said, "You're old and useless." That moment, I decided he would never control another dollar of mine. What I did next changed everything. Before I tell you what I did, comment where you're watching from, and please subscribe so my story can reach more people like me. I was not born into money. My father worked in a small repair shop. My mother cleaned houses. I grew up wearing secondhand clothes and walking long distances to school because we could not afford the bus. At 15, I got my first job loading trucks for a small delivery service. The pay was low, but I learned how goods moved, how schedules worked, and how drivers thought. By 20, I knew I wanted my own logistics company. I started small, one used truck, an old desk, and a second-hand phone. I drove the truck myself during the day, handled paperwork at night, and slept in the office when I was too tired to go home. Slowly, I built a reputation for being reliable. If I promised delivery, it was delivered. No excuses. Customers trusted me. That trust grew into contracts. Contracts grew into more trucks. Within 10 years, I had a small fleet. By the time I turned 40, I had 20 trucks, 30 employees, and contracts with big companies that paid on time. My office was modest, but it was mine. I knew every driver's name, their children's birthdays, and the best routes to avoid traffic in any part of the city. My employees respected me because they knew I had done their work myself. I had built this company brick by brick, mile by mile. When my son was born, I promised myself he would never live the life I did. I wanted him to have the best. I saved for his education from the day he was born. I paid for the best private schools, tutors, and extra activities. I didn't want him to just pass exams. I wanted him to be confident, capable, and prepared for any challenge. When it came time for university, I sent him abroad to one of the best business schools in the world. I wanted him to see more than just our city. I wanted him to learn how the world worked. I paid for everything: tuition, housing, food, travel. I told myself it was an investment in the future of the business and in him. While he was away, I kept working, expanding the company. I bought new trucks, hired more people, and signed bigger contracts. I imagined the day he would come back, walk into the office, and take over with fresh ideas and modern knowledge. I thought he would appreciate the foundation I built, and I would finally be able to rest a little, knowing the company was in safe hands. When he graduated with his MBA, I didn't make him start at the bottom. I put him straight into an executive role. No loading trucks, no making deliveries, no long hours in the dispatch office. I wanted him to focus on the bigger picture. I told him, "You will have to earn the respect of the staff, but you won't have to fight for a place here. It's already yours." I thought this would show him that I trusted him completely. At first, it seemed fine. He came to meetings, listened to my advice, and asked questions. I was proud to introduce him as my son and the future of the company. But slowly, I began to notice small changes. He started talking more in meetings, not just about new ideas, but about how things should be done differently. That was fine. I wanted fresh thinking. But then he started talking as if he had built the company himself. He would tell clients about our vision without once mentioning how it all started. He would give speeches at events and thank the team, but never me. I ignored it. I told myself he was just finding his voice and his place in the business. I thought the respect would come later, that maybe he just didn't like talking about family in public. But deep down, I noticed the shift. I had given him everything, and he was starting to act as if it was all his from the beginning. When he suggested changing the company name to something more modern, I laughed at first. But he wasn't joking. He wanted to remove my name, the name that was on every truck, every invoice, every contract for the past 40 years. He said it was better for branding. I told him no. He didn't push back that day, but I could see in his eyes he wasn't happy with my answer. Still, I thought we could work together. I kept giving him more control, more authority. I stayed in the background, believing it was best for him to take the lead. I trusted him with everything: the finances, the staff decisions, the contracts. I thought we were building a stronger future together. Looking back, I see now that I made one big mistake. I assumed my sacrifice would be remembered. I thought that giving him the best education, the highest position, and full control would make him grateful. I believed he would value my work and respect me as the man who made it all possible. I could not have been more wrong. It started with small things. He would walk into the office without greeting the older employees who had been here since the first truck. People who had carried the company on their backs through storms, strikes, and fuel shortages. Instead of shaking their hands or asking about their families, he would head straight to his office, close the door, and send emails. When clients came in, he would introduce himself as the CEO and talk about our new era, skipping the part about the decades of work that made that era possible. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe he was just busy. Maybe it was a new style of leadership. But it didn't stop. In meetings, he began to speak over me, not just adding points, but correcting me in front of the team. Once, when I explained why we chose a certain delivery route to save time, he cut in and said there were better ways now, and that the old method was outdated. Everyone went quiet. I kept my face calm, but inside I felt something crack. I had been in this business long enough to know every shortcut, every traffic pattern, every toll schedule. But to him, my knowledge was just old. Then came the budget changes. Without asking me, he reduced maintenance spending to redirect money into marketing. He said it was to modernize the brand. I told him cutting maintenance would cost us more later when trucks broke down. He brushed it off, saying, "We'll handle it when it happens." The arrogance in his tone was new. It wasn't advice or debate anymore. It was dismissal. Soon after, I overheard him on the phone with a friend. He was laughing, talking about how he was cleaning up the mess his father had left him. I froze in the hallway. Mess? The company had no debt. We had strong contracts, a loyal team, and a reputation for reliability. If that was a mess, I didn't know what success looked like. The staff started to notice, too. Some came to me privately and said they didn't like the way he treated them. Others simply avoided him. But I didn't want to create a divide. I told them to respect his decisions. I thought maybe, with time, he would learn. Maybe he would realize that leadership wasn't about acting like you know everything. It was about listening, respecting, and guiding. But his behavior only grew worse. He started hosting private meetings without me. Decisions that used to require my input were suddenly made without a word. New suppliers were brought in. Old partners dropped. I would hear about these changes from outsiders, not from him. When I confronted him, he said, "You're retired in all but name. I'm just speeding up the process." That was when I understood. This wasn't about helping me slow down or making my life easier. This was about pushing me out. He wanted the title, the authority, the credit, but not the man who built it all. I had seen enough in life to know that disrespect doesn't start with a slap in the face. It starts with little cuts, one after another, until the wound is deep enough to bleed. He had stopped seeing me as a father who gave him everything and started seeing me as an obstacle to be removed. The day it finally broke was not dramatic on the surface. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where nothing special was supposed to happen. I walked into the yard and noticed the old blue truck missing. That truck wasn't just another vehicle. It was the first one I had bought when I started this company. It had hauled the first loads, carried the heaviest jobs, and survived winters where newer trucks froze on the side of the road. I kept it serviced even when it wasn't in use because it was a reminder of where we came from. To me, it was more than a truck. It was history. It was proof that grit could outlast glamour. When I asked where it was, one of the mechanics said it had been sold. Sold. Just like that. No call, no warning, no respect. He said my son told him it was junk and took the first offer he got from a scrap dealer. I felt my chest tighten. I asked where the paperwork was, and the mechanic shrugged, saying it was handled. I went straight to his office. He didn't even look surprised when I walked in. He just leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, like he'd been waiting for this moment. I asked him why he sold the truck. He smiled, actually smiled, and said, "It was taking up space. We need to move forward, not hold on to relics." Relics. That was the word he used for the truck that built the company he was now running. I told him that truck wasn't his to sell without my approval. He told me everything in the yard was under his control now. Then he said something that burned deeper than anything before. "Dad, you had your time. This is mine now." There it was. No mask, no polite front, no pretending we were partners. He wasn't just pushing me out. He had already decided I was gone. I stood there, looking at him, wondering how a son could forget so quickly the years I'd put in, the sacrifices I'd made, the nights I stayed awake worrying about payroll, the storms I drove through so our drivers could rest. None of it mattered to him anymore. I left his office without another word. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me angry. But inside, I was more than angry. I was done. The line had been crossed. This wasn't about a truck anymore. This was about erasing me from the story. He wasn't building on my legacy. He was burying it. When I walked out into the yard, I didn't see trucks or workers or shipments. I saw years of my life being dismantled piece by someone who thought leadership meant cutting out the people who cared the most. And I knew right then I wasn't going to fight him for scraps of respect. I was going to take back the power he thought he had. Quietly. Completely. When I left that yard that afternoon, I didn't go home. I didn't go to the small apartment above the garage where I'd been living since handing over the main house to my son. I drove. I didn't know where at first. I just knew I couldn't sit in that place another minute. The streets blurred past the windshield, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than I had in years. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns fast and dies. This was colder, sharper. The kind of feeling that doesn't want to yell. It wants to act. I started thinking about the patterns. This wasn't sudden. He had been slowly cutting me out for years. First, it was little things, not telling me about meetings, forgetting to pass along key updates, replacing old suppliers I trusted with flashy new ones who promised the moon. Then it was bigger, moving my desk, selling my truck, changing the branding without asking me. He had been positioning himself for this takeover all along, and I had let it happen because I believed he'd still respect me when he had the title. I was wrong. By the time I hit the edge of town, I knew exactly what I had to do. The business was technically ours, but the truth was, I still held certain things he couldn't touch without my permission. I had personal shares in a separate account. I had a private investment portfolio from the early days when I sold a piece of land to keep the company afloat, and I had a few assets nobody in the company even knew existed because they were never tied to the business name. That was my leverage. I pulled over at a diner I used to stop at back when I drove deliveries myself. I sat in a booth, ordered coffee, and pulled out my notebook. The plan started to write itself. I wasn't going to confront him in a screaming match. That would only make him dig in deeper. I wasn't going to try to wrestle control of the company back either. The employees were too scared of him now, and I had no interest in running a place that had lost its soul. No, I was going to do something simpler, cleaner. I was going to move the one thing he wanted most out of his reach, the money. But it couldn't just disappear. That would be sloppy and might cause legal trouble down the line. It had to go somewhere safe, somewhere it would be appreciated. That's when I thought of her, my ex-wife. We hadn't been married in decades, but we stayed civil. More than civil, really. She had been there at the very beginning of the business. She had typed invoices on an old typewriter in our living room. She had driven across state lines to deliver orders when I was sick. And she had always respected the company. I remembered a conversation we had years ago, long after the divorce. We were standing in the kitchen of her place, drinking coffee, and she said, "One day, he's going to push you out. I can see it in the way he talks to you." I had laughed it off then. Now, her words felt like a warning I'd ignored. The coffee went cold as I kept writing. Step 1. Call my lawyer. Step 2. Liquidate every personal share I could legally touch without needing the board's approval. Step 3. Cash out the hidden portfolio. Step 4. Transfer the total to an account in her name, one that couldn't be linked back to him or the business. Step 5. Let him find out after it was already done. I didn't rush. A plan like this needed precision. Over the next few days, I started moving pieces quietly. I visited my lawyer in person. No phone calls, no emails. We sat in his office and went over every detail. He understood immediately. Didn't even ask for the full story. Lawyers who've been around long enough know when not to ask. It took less than a week to set it all in motion. By Friday afternoon, everything was ready. The money, all $1.9 million of it, was sitting in an account controlled by my ex-wife. She didn't ask why. She just said, "I'll keep it safe." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I'd taken revenge, but because I had taken back control. He thought power came from the title on the office door. I knew better. Power comes from knowing where the real levers are and having the courage to pull them. I didn't storm into his office the next morning. I walked in slow, steady, like a man who had all the time in the world. He was behind his desk, tapping at his phone, barely looking up when I came in. That told me everything. No respect, no acknowledgement. Just a man who thought he had already won. I sat down without being asked. He didn't like that. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened. "What do you want?" he finally asked, still not setting the phone down. "I'm here to make something clear," I said. My voice was calm, even. I wasn't here to argue. I wasn't here to explain. I was here to deliver a fact. You don't own me. You don't own everything you think you own. And as of yesterday, you've lost the one thing you've been working for since you were old enough to tie your own tie. That got his attention. He put the phone down and leaned back in his chair, trying to play it cool. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the money," I said. "The investments, the shares, the safety net you thought you could grab when you finally pushed me out. They're gone, moved, locked away where you can't touch them." His face didn't show anger right away, just confusion, then suspicion. Then it started to turn red. "You can't do that," he said, his voice rising. "I just did," I replied, still calm, still steady. "You've been planning this takeover for years, and I've been watching. You forgot one thing. You don't win by sitting in that chair. You win by controlling the foundation, and I've just pulled it out from under you." He leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. "You think this scares me? I'll rebuild. I'll make double what you took." "Maybe you will," I said. "But you'll do it without the safety net, without the cushion, without the legacy I built. You'll have to fight for every dollar like I did in the beginning. And you'll do it knowing I chose to let it go rather than watch you waste it." For a long moment, the room was silent. He didn't move. I didn't move. I wanted that silence to sink in. I wanted him to understand that this wasn't a bluff. This was already done. Then I stood. "I'm done here," I said. "The business is yours now, all of it. But the history, the foundation, the soul of it, that walked out with me." I turned and left without waiting for a response. In the hallway, I felt lighter. Not because I'd hurt him, but because I'd freed myself from needing his approval ever again. I didn't go back to the company after that day. There was no point. My desk was gone. My authority was gone. And I had no interest in sitting in a corner, waiting for scraps of respect. Instead, I went home and started living life on my terms. I woke up when I wanted. I went to the market in the mornings, cooked my own meals, and took long walks in the park. I hadn't done that in years. The news of what I'd done spread faster than I expected. Old business friends called me, some to congratulate me, others to ask if it was true. I didn't confirm or deny anything. I just told them I was enjoying my time off. But I knew word had reached my son. Within weeks, I heard about the changes. projects he had planned stalled because there wasn't enough cash flow. The banks wouldn't extend credit without my name attached to the company. Investors grew nervous and started pulling back. The office that once ran like a machine began missing deadlines. People noticed. Some of my oldest employees, the ones who had been there since the early days, began calling me. They said the atmosphere had changed, the respect and teamwork were gone. My son was running things like a dictator, making decisions without listening to anyone. Good people started leaving. They didn't quit outright at first. They quietly moved over to my ex-wife's new branch. She had reopened the old warehouse and started building her own team, using the $1.9 million I'd given her as seed money. I visited her office one afternoon. It felt familiar, like the early days of our company. People smiled when they saw me. They shook my hand, asked for advice, and actually listened. I didn't own any part of her business officially, but I could see it was thriving because she valued the people in it. Meanwhile, my son refused to speak to me. I didn't mind. Our relationship had been broken long before that boardroom meeting. But I knew he was struggling because every so often I'd get an email from someone in the industry telling me his deals were falling apart. Suppliers were cutting ties. Clients were looking for other partners. His arrogance had burned too many bridges, and without the financial cushion I once provided, there was no room for his mistakes. I didn't celebrate his downfall. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting what I had worked for from being destroyed by someone who didn't value it. And it was about reminding him that age doesn't make you useless. It makes you dangerous if you've learned how to move quietly. By the end of the year, his company was a shadow of what it had been. Mine and my ex-wife's branch, growing, expanding, hiring the people he pushed away. I didn't need to say a word to him. The results spoke for themselves. And that's when I realized I didn't lose my company. I just moved it somewhere it would be respected. The day after that humiliating meeting, I called my lawyer. I told him exactly what I wanted: fast, quiet, and completely legal. I had built more than just a company over my lifetime. I had built a safety net. Over the years, I had invested in properties, stocks, and a few private ventures that weren't connected to the main business. My son didn't know about all of them. That was intentional. I had learned long ago that in business, you always keep something in reserve, something no one else can touch. We sat in my lawyer's office and went through the list. The numbers were solid. I had more than enough to live on for the rest of my life. The question wasn't if I could move the money, it was where. I thought about giving it to charity, but I wanted the value to go somewhere it would be appreciated and used well. That's when my ex-wife came to mind. She had been there in the early days, before the first truck, before the first contract. She knew what it meant to work 16-hour days without seeing a profit. She had rolled up her sleeves and loaded boxes when we couldn't afford extra hands. Even after our marriage ended, she stayed in the business for a while, and she left with respect, not bitterness. Unlike our son, she understood that a company's real strength was in its people, not just in numbers on a sheet. We hadn't spoken much in recent years, but I still knew her well enough to trust her. She was steady, she valued loyalty, and most importantly, she wasn't blinded by ego. So I called her. When I told her what had happened, she was quiet at first. Then she sighed and said, "I warned you. He doesn't see what you've built, only what he can take from it." There was no anger in her voice, just resignation. I told her I wanted to transfer $1.9 million into an account she would control completely. Her first reaction was to refuse, not because she didn't need it, but because she didn't want to be caught in the middle. I told her it wasn't about taking sides. It was about making sure the work we started together wasn't destroyed by arrogance. She agreed, but only if everything was done cleanly and without any legal risk. My lawyer assured us it would be airtight. We created a trust in her name, funded entirely by my personal assets, separate from the company. Every cent was documented. No one could claim it was stolen or hidden. It was mine, and I chose where it went. The transfer happened in 2 stages. First, we liquidated a block of shares I held privately in a logistics firm overseas. Then we sold a small commercial property I had kept in my name for years. The funds were wired into the trust over 3 days. By the end of the week, it was done. 1.9 million moved out of my reach and completely out of my son's. I didn't tell him. I didn't need to. I knew he would find out soon enough when he tried to draw from the reserves he thought existed. My ex-wife promised she would use the money wisely, not to live in luxury, but to invest in people and projects that mattered. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. This wasn't revenge. This was insurance. Insurance against incompetence, against greed, against the slow death of everything I had built. My son thought power came from control. I knew it came from preparation. The papers were signed, the funds were secured, and the door to my lawyer's office closed behind me. I walked out into the city air feeling lighter. My son could call me old. He could call me useless. But now, he would learn the hard way that the man he underestimated had just moved the one piece of the game he could never win back. It was 2 weeks later when the confrontation came. My son walked into my office without knocking. His face was flushed, his jaw tight, and his voice already raised before he even sat down. He had discovered the missing money. I could tell because he didn't bother with small talk. He went straight for the accusation. He demanded to know where the reserves had gone, insisting that the company needed them for strategic expansion. I didn't flinch. I told him in plain words that those reserves were never his to begin with. They were mine, built from my own work, separate from the company, and I had decided they were better off elsewhere. His tone shifted from demanding to outright furious. He called it sabotage. He called it betrayal. I let him rant for a minute, then cut him off. I reminded him of the meeting where he had told me I was too old to matter and that my experience was outdated. I told him he had made it clear he didn't value what I brought to the table, and that a man who undervalues the foundation he stands on should expect it to be removed from under him. He tried to push back, saying it was just tough business talk and that I shouldn't take it personally. I laughed, but not in amusement. There's no such thing as just business when you're dealing with family. Every word hits deeper. Every decision leaves a mark. I told him the transfer was permanent and that he should focus on running the company with what he still had instead of chasing after what was gone. The silence that followed was heavy. He realized in that moment there was no undoing it. No legal loophole, no board vote, no clever manipulation would bring that money back. It was out of his reach, forever. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My calm was louder than his shouting. I told him he could either adapt and learn, or he could burn himself out trying to prove me wrong. The choice was his. He left without another word. I watched him walk out, his shoulders stiff, his pride wounded. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was closure. I had made my move. The rest was on him. The cracks in his empire started showing almost immediately. Without that 1.9 million cushion, every risk he had taken was suddenly exposed. The expansion plans he'd bragged about to investors fell apart because he couldn't secure the extra funding. The suppliers who had been offering him favorable credit terms started demanding advance payments. He tried bluffing his way through, promising profits that never came, but word travels fast in business. Within months, his reputation as a visionary was replaced by whispers of recklessness. Investors began pulling out. A few called me privately, saying they had only stayed on board because they trusted the stability I had once brought. Without me and without the money, they weren't willing to bet on him. Clients who had been with the company for decades shifted their contracts to my ex-wife's newly revived branch, the one I had quietly helped her set up with that transfer. She treated them with the same respect we had back in the early days, and they noticed the difference immediately. Inside his own office, the loyalty he thought he commanded began to fade. Staff who had once tolerated his arrogance because of his position now saw weakness. The energy of the place changed. Meetings grew tense. People started looking for exits, and some didn't even bother giving notice. Each departure hit him harder because he realized too late that authority without respect doesn't last. I watched from a distance, not to gloat, but to understand. There's a strange clarity that comes from seeing the very structure you built crumble under someone else's pride. It's like watching a house you designed catch fire because someone decided they didn't need to follow the plans. You don't feel joy, you feel inevitability. By the end of the year, the company was a shadow of what it had been. My son stopped calling. I didn't expect him to. In his mind, this was my fault. In reality, I had simply removed the safety net he thought would catch him no matter how badly he jumped. He had been given every advantage in life, and he mistook it for an unlimited supply of second chances. The truth is, those chances run out. The last time I saw him in a professional setting, it was at a shareholder meeting I attended as an observer. His voice didn't carry the same confidence. His suits looked more expensive, but his eyes didn't. I left halfway through, knowing there was nothing left for me to see. The lesson had already been delivered. These days, my life is quieter, and that's exactly how I want it. I spend part of my time in the countryside, where the air is clean and the mornings feel like they belong to me. The house there isn't grand, but it's mine. Built over years with the same patience I once used in business. I grow vegetables in the garden, drink my coffee on the porch, and watch the seasons change without feeling like I'm wasting time. For the first time in decades, my days aren't dictated by meetings, phone calls, or the ticking clock of someone else's urgency. The rest of my time, I choose to spend at the office my ex-wife now runs. She's built it into something remarkable, not flashy, not loud, but solid, respected, and profitable. Walking in there feels different. People look me in the eye. They greet me by name, not by title. They ask for advice, not because they have to, but because they actually want it. And when I give it, they listen. That respect means more to me now than any figure on a balance sheet ever could. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about the early days, when my son was still a boy, and I imagined him taking over with pride and gratitude. I remember believing that building something for your family guaranteed loyalty. It doesn't. What I've learned is simple. You can pass down your wealth, your company, and your contacts, but you can't pass down your values unless the person wants them. And if they don't want them, they'll see everything you give as just a stepping stone to their own ego. I don't hate my son. I don't even wish him harm. I just know now that distance is healthier than disappointment. I gave him every tool to succeed, but when he decided I was old and useless, he also decided he no longer valued the foundation that got him where he is. That was his choice. My choice was to give the value I had left to someone who respected it. That someone happened to be his mother, the woman who helped me build it all in the first place. I'm not bitter. If anything, I'm free. Free from the constant tug of war for recognition in my own company. Free from the noise of boardrooms where respect has been replaced by ambition. Free from trying to prove that I'm still worth listening to. My worth isn't measured in my age, my title, or even my money anymore. It's measured in the peace I feel when I wake up, the hands I shake from people who remember what I stood for, and the work I still choose to do on my own terms. People ask me if I regret transferring that $1.9 million. I tell them no, because money, like trust, should be in the hands of those who won't waste it. My ex-wife has proven she'll use it to grow something lasting, and I've proven to myself that I can walk away from something I built without letting it define me. I think about that day in the boardroom sometimes, the moment my son called me old and useless. I remember the silence, the way people looked down at the table, the heat in my face as I gathered my papers. I remember walking out, not in anger, but with the calm certainty that I didn't need to fight for a place where I wasn't wanted. That moment didn't break me. It freed me. So, this is my closure. He said I was old and useless. I took the value he thought was his and gave it to someone who knew exactly what it meant. The rest, his downfall, his empty office, his reputation, that's just the natural consequence of arrogance. I didn't destroy him. I simply stopped protecting him from himself. and I'll never apologize for that.